I think it's important to say and to restate that Allan and I, it's well known that Allan and I, in our most challenging days, we weren't the greatest mates. But we put on a hell of a show for motorsport that's still here today.
You never came around bashing me behind. You weren't bouncing me around in those days.
No, you were backing into me a lot. No, the point is that we weren't...
I'm dumbfounded.
I don't know about the second word, but I agree with the first. The point I'm making is as much aggro as we showed to the crowd, and as good as that was for motorsport, it's great that we're mates these days, genuinely.
And it's going to stay that way.
Absolutely.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Apple Isle for a weekend of motor racing for round 3 of the Australian Touring Car Championship. Practice at Symmons Plains just outside of Launceston today and the race over 40 laps tomorrow. Will Hagon, one of my co-commentators, what about the situation in the Touring Car Championship after 2 rounds?
Well, it's a very interesting one. We've got George Fury leading the championship, not really able so far during races to match pace with Moffat or with the V8 Commodores, Grice and Brock, but looking fairly secure now if he plays the championship sensibly in terms of winning the championship. But then we've got the individual races, and tomorrow that's going to be very interesting because people like Grice and Brock, who are further back in the championship, Johnson to a lesser extent, whose Falcon really isn't serving him very well at the moment, and particularly Moffat, are going to make a great race of it, and that's almost a separate issue. Fury will tend not to want to get too mixed up in the desperate scrapping, but equally he doesn't want to fall right back out of it. He wants glory in race by race if he can get it.
Well, all the old names are there with Brock, Moffat and Dick Johnson. Can George Fury, in this pretty new car, break their domination?
Well, as I say, in the championship sense, he's got every chance of doing it in the way the point score's constituted. I think he needs to finish the rest of the series in 4th place and 3rd in 1 to take the championship if Moffat were to win every race. So the task in front of him in terms of championship sense is not a difficult one. But they want to win races. They're keen on developing the car. It's a Nissan factory entry. Nobody else backs it. There are no other sponsors. So they want to do well in each individual race. And George is a very talented driver, although he's only had about 18 months in circuit racing, having come from rallying.
Thanks, Will. Well, we'll look forward to hearing you over the weekend. My other co-commentator here at Symmons Plains in Launceston is John Smailes. John, what about this circuit?
Well, the circuit, Drew, looks pretty simple, but in fact it's probably the hardest circuit in Australia on brakes. There are 2 hard braking points at each end of the circuit, and then 2 touch points for the brakes as well in the S's. So tomorrow, the chances of the big V8s especially running out of brakes are very strong here because there's no time on the circuit for the brakes to recover. Again, the circuit sort of favours the V8s to a degree in as much as there are 2 long straights where the V8s can really wind out, and then in the slower corners the V8s can use their greater torque capability to be able to get through the corner without having too many gear changes and without the need to really be high revving, because if the heat is like it is today, the smaller cars will really start to suffer from heat as well.
It's a hard circuit for overtaking. Will that perhaps favour the smaller cars, say like Moffat's RX-7?
It's doubtful if Moffat's RX-7 will get to the lead from the start tomorrow, and therefore he'll be the one who's in jeopardy, because he'll be the one who's trying to pass the big V8s. And I wouldn't like to be in Moffat's shoes tomorrow. We saw at Sandown a couple of weeks ago what happened when Allan Moffat did try overtaking on a V8, and the same thing is very much on the cards here tomorrow.
So it should be a race full of action on a small circuit with pretty critical braking areas.
Oh, very, very much so, yeah. The lap times aren't that much different between the smaller cars and the big ones, but what we're seeing is the big cars braking at the 150 metre mark and the little cars like Moffat going in so deep, so precariously, and then having to change their gears midway through a corner at the end of the main straight, which is unsettling their cars a lot. Now the V8 guys will really play on that, and you might find just a little bit of touching and ducking and weaving in the corners as the V8 cars feel out just how steady the smaller cars are in the actual cornering positions.
Thanks, John. Look forward to hearing you over the weekend. Well, it's practice today and the race over 40 laps is tomorrow, which, as John has pointed out, should be really excellent watching on ABC Sport. But in the meantime, let's have a look at the cars as they go through their paces during official practice here on the Saturday afternoon.
And the first car out for this practice session was the series leader, George Fury, here in Nissan Bluebird Turbo, number 55. George hasn't done an enormous number of laps today at better than 60 seconds. He's mostly been around the 60 and a half because he has presently got a handling problem in that car. But he has, however, had a time of 59.65, one of his better times that's put him fourth on the grid at this stage, 0.34 of a second slower than Brock, 0.55 of a second slower than Moffat, who is second fastest, and about 0.7 of a second slower than Grice, who at the moment is sitting on pole.
After 2 rounds of the 8-round Australian Touring Car Championship, Fury leads the point score on 48 points from Murray Carter on 35, Gary Rogers, who's not here today, on 27 points, young Steve Harrington on 26, Alan Moffat and Alan Grice tied on 25 points each, then Warren Cullen 24, Peter Brock 23, Laurie Nelson 22, and Dick Johnson, the current Australian Touring Car Champion and therefore the defending champion, on 20 points.
Very interesting circuit, Symmons Plains. This is the straight at the end of virtually the main straight, that tight switchback corner that runs downhill as well, so it probably raises it almost a gear on what cars would take it if it were level. And then this very fast back section, which has this high-speed corner that on a really quick accelerating motorbike could be anything up to a 250 km/h corner. Braking here, hard brakes, even Fury running on a slow lap at the moment, but braking still, and coming around the tight back section of the circuit. As you can see, he's planning to call into the pits. We were talking to George Fury earlier today, actually, about this race and about his situation in the championship overall. George Fury, your opening lap incident at the Sandown race had everybody aghast. How did it seem from the driver's viewpoint?
Well, at the time, of course, you fairly wound up and everything, and you don't take much notice of that. And in my time, I've missed many trees that close, so another one didn't matter all that much.
There were almost 2 problems, the first one being up on 2 wheels and the second one drifting out very close to the fence.
Yes, that's right. Getting up on 2 wheels, I did that because I cut the corner a bit closer than I ever did before to get a bit more initial speed, so I thought through the corner to hold Dick Johnson off, but as it was obvious, it didn't work, and well...
It did in a sense because Dick desperately was looking for a way out of the melee that he thought was going to ensue.
Yeah, well, we all got out of it, and at the time I didn't think it was all that dangerous, but it let Dick past, and that was a pity then.
How close were you to hitting the fence? I mean, was the car really running out hard towards that, or did you just let it drift out?
I think by then I had the power down, and I let it drift out, but it was very close, as I knew it was within an inch anyway.
George, you've been having trouble coming past the pits here, where when you're really going for a time, the car is skipping outwards instead of sliding smoothly. What's the problem?
Yes, well, we haven't been here before. I haven't been here before, and it's a difficult little car to sort out on a new circuit, and we've been working on it very hard, and we haven't sorted all the bugs out of it yet, and we'll continue today to in the next couple of practice sessions to try and get the car a bit better. But I think our times are reasonable.
Being championship leader, does it affect your attitude to the remaining 6 races in the series?
Probably not just yet, because it's still a long way to go. You know, about halfway through, if we happen to be still doing well, I think we'll look at it in a more in an endurance sort of a way than at the moment.
Thank you, George Fury, driving a Nissan Bluebird Turbo.
Winner of the Australian Touring Car Championship in 1973, 1976 and 1977, Allan Moffat is in 5th place this year on equal 25 points with Alan Grice. Moffat won the first round of the championship at Calder Raceway, but did not finish at Sandown 2 weeks ago after he broke a rear axle whilst involved in a passing manoeuvre with Alan Grice. Moffat not really content with the Symmons Plains circuit here today. His gearing is not quite right for the circuit. He's finding that he's having to change up from second to third gear, almost in the middle of a corner at the back of the circuit on Coca-Cola corner, and that isn't a good feeling in a car that's going so quickly and so close to the limit. Drew Morphett spoke to Alan Moffat earlier about his chances in tomorrow's race.
Alan, what special preparation do you have to go through to set the car up for a particular circuit?
Right here to start with, mentally. If the driver can't do the job, the car is only a machine. It does what we're trying to guide it to do. And we can spend many hours, as we have here on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, setting the car up, but it's still a mile away from what the driver has to do on qualifying day if you're interested in getting the pole. And naturally, that's what we're here to do. In that respect, you can't hammer the car into the ground lap after lap. We've done almost 200 laps of development driving here in 3 days, and it only takes 1 lap to get pole. So that last little bit that you're asking for on the stopwatch has to come out of the driver.
Do you find extra pressure because you get involved so much in the work yourself?
Well, I wouldn't do it if I wasn't involved in it. It's the hired gun, so to speak, type of driver who arrives with his satchel and his hat and his Sunday suit and gets into his driving uniform. That's never been my scene.
I wonder what advantage you have in driving from the left-hand seat at this circuit.
Well, this circuit, Sandown and Bathurst, are the only counterclockwise circuits in Australia. And because our car is so tiny, only 950 kilograms, my 80 Ks is important to have it on the inside of the corner, the way my balance, we have the car balanced to go through the corners. Last year when I drove the right-hand drive here on the pit corner, I nearly tipped it over in qualifying. I got really carried away, and as the car went over, I was helping it go. So one, we had the choice because the Japanese market is left and the American market is left-hand drive. We simply got a spare one. Our spare car is left-hand drive, but we'll only run it here, Sandown, and at Bathurst. So this will be the last time this car runs now until next September.
Alan Grice has been the pace setter for the series so far. He's driving one of these 2 STP Roadways team cars. He's in number 6. His teammate, young Steve Harrington, Tasmanian, is driving number 4. And Grice so far has been the quickest touring car around this circuit. Moffat qualified last year at 59.7. Grice's best qualifying time in an earlier practice session today was 58.93, 0.8 of a second under that, and Brock's record is 60.4. So they really have been well and truly under the previous best times. In fact, 5 cars have been under the existing lap record in practices here today. We were talking with Alan Grice earlier today about the situation in the Touring Car Championship, in which he's been going so well so far.
Pace setting at Symmons Plains with a time almost 3/4 of a second under last year's pole position after only the first session of practice. Alan Grice, that must feel all right.
Yes, very pleased to do it here too. It's the home state of Roadways, and you know, they're one of the major backers in the team, and so we're very pleased to be putting the right foot forward.
After the first session, Brock's almost a second behind you. Had you expected him to be so far back?
I think that's probably not quite right. I think he's probably half a second behind us, but I can tell you this, that my lap time was about as good as I can do, and if anybody goes quicker than that, congratulations to him. I think that was a good lap of ours, and the car was right for that lap, but I don't think I can do any better.
The circuit's very hard on brakes. What are the tactics tomorrow?
Yes, there's no doubt in the world that this circuit is the hardest there is in this country on brakes. And I don't think we can treat it as a 40-lap sprint, which is normally the case in 50-mile races. I don't think the brakes will last for 40 consecutive hard laps of full application. So there's going to be a little bit of foxing. It's the decisions will be whether to go hard early and try and get a gap that you can protect, or whether to sit back a little early and try and finish with strong brakes.
Allan Moffat is getting under the 150-metre braking marker consistently, so he's got to be a big contender in that area.
Yeah, the weight of his car, of course, it physically is less mass to arrest at the end of the straights than ours is. He's about 920 kilos and we're about 1,230. So, you know, it takes a lot of pulling up that extra weight.
Nonetheless, most of the pundits say it's a V8 win tomorrow. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it might be. I think it's the type of track where he can give us plenty of hassle and plenty of trouble towards the end, as he normally does, but it's a very difficult circuit to pass on. And as you know, as we saw at Sandown, you know, that's virtually the way it finished there, where he was faced with a situation where two hit the front. He had to go down the outside, which is a difficult way around, and that makes it difficult.
Following Alan Grice round in this practice session is his young co-driver, Stephen Harrington. Only 21 years of age. Harrington started racing in 1979 for the in Tasmania. He, of course, being a resident of Tasmania, comes from Hobart, and his hometown, or rather his home circuit, Baskerville, is where he learnt his trade only a very short time ago. His father, Ian, in fact, owns the Roadways concern, which is the major principal sponsor of these two cars, the STP Roadways cars. But very much Harrington sees himself as being the number two man in the team, learning everything he can from Allan Grice. Nonetheless, Harrington leads Grice in the championship at the moment, having taken 2 sixth places in the last 2 heats to hold 26 points, 1 point ahead of Grice. I asked him earlier today just how he felt being in a team with a man as experienced as Allan Grice. At 21, Steve Harrington is the youngest serious contender in this year's Australian Touring Car Championship. Steve, it's a big responsibility.
Yes, it is, John. Definitely.
How do you go about meeting it with such experienced competitors around you?
Well, I've got a very experienced backer in Allan Grice, who helps me a hell of a lot. Apart from that, we just play it along.
Just how much help has Allan been to you? What's he teaching?
It's very hard to put it down to specifics. It's just general talk that I would not normally have or hear, and just things that subconsciously he is telling me.
Well, your family, of course, owns the Roadways team. Your father is the sole proprietor of it, and yet Allan is the lead driver. Are there any conflicts at all in the team?
No, definitely not. I know my position. I'm still coming up. Allan's there and most likely to succeed this year, and we're quite happy to just sit back and learn from his experience.
When you say learn, in fact, you're holding 4th position in the championship at the moment.
That's due to a fair amount of luck at the moment. The top 3 guys have both failed to complete both the heats for both races so far, and I've been fortunate enough to finish both in 6th position, which gives me quite good point standing.
Do you see yourself as being an outright contender?
No, not really, not this year. We'll just plug along and hope to pick up points and hope that we're there at the finish.
What support can you be to Allan if he needs team help?
We'll always be there in 4th, 5th, 6th position, somewhere just a little bit back, so we feel that we can be quite good support if need be.
Well, with Steve Harrington circulating and in fact being shown the way around by Allan Grice, and Allan certainly knows the right way round here at the moment, because he has been in stupendous form all last year in this, really. He really made his comeback, if you like, when he was slotted into one of Alan Brown's cars to do some sorting at Amaroo early last year for the March meeting. And he put that right up on the front of the grid and started to cement a long and happy friendship with them, which led to him coming 2nd at Bathurst, being, of course, the first 100-mile-an-hour lap there, and pole position. So Allan really has been in great form, and this year has been the man to catch, has been every bit as quick as Peter Brock, which a lot of people sort of feel isn't possible. But despite that, he's well down in the series point score. Leading him in the point score is George Fury, who's in the lead overall with 48 points. Then second in that point score, the man that many people don't know other than by name, but he's been around such a long time in Australian motor racing, and before that in motorcycle racing, and it's the veteran driver Murray Carter. He's finished both rounds, third at Calder, fifth at Sandown, amassed 35 points, which puts him in front of Harrington 26, Grice and Moffat on 25 and Brock on 23. And this is the man, and we were talking to him earlier today. Murray Carter presently holding second place in the Australian Touring Car Championship after 2 rounds. Do you think you've got any hope of winning the championship on consistency?
No, I think that the consistency is a thing of the past. These races normally run at a sprint pace, and the reliability factor of most of the cars is very good. So as far as winning it on a situation where you're expecting or relying on others to fall out, those days have gone.
How do you see the championship between the various makes of cars? You and Dick Johnson chasing the series in Falcons, strong Commodore representation with Grice and Brock, and then of course we've got Moffat in a Mazda and a Bluebird as well. How do you see those makes, one against the other?
Well, I think the Mazda will probably be the most competitive of all the contenders. The Bluebird is developing very well, and I'm sure it will improve as the series goes. But of course the Commodores, well, they'll be there. Falcon, I feel that the cost will gradually wear us down, and I feel that we may fall behind.
What about competitiveness of the Falcon too? Because that's been a problem, hasn't it?
It has. It's been a problem with the tyre situation. Our weight, we're chasing wider back wheels because of the back tyres don't do the job consistently, so we're running a problem right from the beginning.
Murray, why do you keep racing and spending an enormous amount of your own time and money on it?
Well, I've spent most of my life pursuing racing. It's been very costly. I hadn't considered an early retirement, but we'll press on, and I do it because I enjoy it.
You're making it a late retirement because you're planning a new car, aren't you?
That's right. We're considering a Mazda. In fact, we have enough components now to build a car, and as soon as we get sufficient time, we'll be building this car and as quickly as possible so that we have something competitive before the long-distance races.
What's the reward for you in the Touring Car Championship? Is it trying to win a race or win the series, or just the satisfaction out of driving well within your budget?
Well, we've got to drive within our budget, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to continue this long. Satisfaction is one thing that I do get out of it. Of course, I always go to a meeting in the hopes that we're going to win one. I've never won a Touring Car Championship, so we'll press on and hopefully we'll win one.
We'll keep our fingers crossed for you. Thanks, Murray Carter.
Good on you. Thank you.
Peter Brock really whistling around now in the Marlborough car, 05, looking for that extra 0.38 or let's say 0.4 of a second that would grab for him pole position from Allan Grice. But Grice has broken too from his teammate Harrington, and he too is chasing a time. So could be a little bit of a dice as the day's a little bit later than earlier in the day, and therefore a little bit cooler. And Brock there, but outside the 60 mark, about a 60.8, so that's nowhere in the ballpark. He's looking at nearly 2 seconds down to Grice's time, 1.9. A little bit less than that to his own, so Brock's got to find a little bit more than that to pull it up. But Brock is one of the top contenders for the Touring Car Championship in terms of pace and experience, who's so far back in the point score that he really has to go for broke in each race. And that means that he, Grice, Johnson and Moffat tomorrow are really going to be fiercely determined to win this race. We heard Moffat say earlier that last year he all but tipped his car over. He was trying so hard, and he said then that he thought he'd never driven any harder in his life than he had to drive at Symmons. And for that, he not only nearly rolled the car, but he also had his only engine failure of the year. He cooked the motor of the Mazda, running in behind Kevin Bartlett. Bartlett pulled up at race end in the big Camaro with absolutely no brakes. He said the pedal went straight to the floor and was doing nothing to stop the car. Brock's car was in a pretty sad state with brakes. It's not just that there's this very tight corner, plus another hard braking point on the circuit, but that it's the fact that it happens within a 1 minute lap. And so the brakes are being used very hard, but secondly, not having time to cool off, and that sort of increases the problem.
Brock failed to finish the first round of the Australian Touring Car Championship this year with gearbox problems at Calder, then came second to Allan Grice at Sandown recently. Of course, with suspension difficulties, he'd not had the opportunity to do much suspension work on the motorcar, as his wife Bev had presented him with a baby during the time that he was supposed to be out practicing in the motorcar.
This is the car that has taken Gary Rogers to third outright in the championship at this stage, but being driven this weekend by Clive Benson-Brown, a Tasmanian who runs some discos down in the Apple Isle. But Gary Rogers has done quite well with it and has been one of few drivers to have amassed points in both rounds, so that his fourth at Calder and eighth at Sandown gives him 27 points and third place at the moment in the championship. But Benson-Brown considerably down on those times, or on those sorts of performance. A 62.29 was his best time earlier in the day. He was fourth slowest. But I might say has by all judgment one of the prettiest girls in the pits. Laurie Nelson, another championship contender who's running all the way round and is in the unfortunate position of being in the 3-litre class and therefore chasing the turbocharged Nissan Bluebird. So really, his only hope for a class win in a normally aspirated V6 3-litre Capri is for where both the turbos are running, or where one's running, for both of them to retire, because there is just no way, no matter who you were behind the wheel, that that car is going to beat one of the more modern Bluebird turbos. Warren Cullen was the man that got Alan Jones back into Australian motor racing, lying 7th in the championship point score at the moment. Another who's scored points at both rounds, 5th at Calder, 9th at Sandown, 24 points, so he's in front of Peter Brock, and this morning was 7th fastest, a 60.72.
Cullen funds his own motor racing. He runs a wrecking yard in Victoria, which sort of downplays exactly what it is. It's one of the largest automotive wreckers in Australia. And he's had a great deal of enjoyment out of his motor racing in the time that he's been in it, which has varied. He's had periods of retirement and then come back in when he's felt the urge again. There's people like Warren Cullen who very much make up the backbone of the sport, who fill out the fields and who certainly provide sometimes fierce competition in the mid-range.
A lot of the championship contenders, Dick Johnson among them, but Brock now, Moffat, Murray Carter for that matter, and George Fury have all pitted their cars and resting them, because the vagaries of getting to Tasmania means that most of them were here on Wednesday, having got an early boat across, and so they've done an enormous amount of pre-race testing so that this qualifying becomes less critical. They all know pretty well what they're going to do, and the cars are ready to do it, so they can do it pretty sharpishly and then put the cars away without putting any more wear and tear on them. And as Warren Cullen goes round and most of the cars rest in the pits, let's go now down to Drew Morphett.
And a reminder that ABC Sport will be covering the entire Touring Car Championship this year, so you'll be able to allocate your weekends according to the draw for the remainder of the series. And round 3 of the championship tomorrow here at Symmons Plains promises to be a real beauty. Already 5 drivers under the existing lap record and under the minute, so that the lap record, which is just over the minute, maybe we'll see that magical minute go tomorrow in actual race times. 5 drivers under the existing lap record held at the moment by Peter Brock, so it should be exciting racing tomorrow. Just a reminder that tomorrow we'll be back live from Symmons Plains here in Tasmania for a direct telecast around Australia through ABC Sport of round 3 of the Australian Touring Car Championship. Hope you can join us then with Will Hagon, John Smailes and myself here from Symmons Plains in Launceston. Good afternoon and welcome to an afternoon of motorsport through ABC Sport, coming to you from Symmons Plains, just outside of Launceston in Tasmania. During the afternoon we'll be seeing motorbikes, also sports sedans and Formula Vs, but the main purpose for being here is round 3 of the Australian Touring Car Championship, and it's all set for a magnificent afternoon. 5 cars in practice are under the existing lap record, which is just over a minute, and so perhaps for the first time ever in a race, the magic minute will be beaten here at Symmons Plains. We've got a very tight situation at the head of the table after 2 rounds, and round 3 pits the winner of the last round, Allan Grice, who again has taken pole position, and next to him, Alan Moffat, who at the moment appears to be his closest challenger. One of our co-commentators this afternoon, Will Hagon. Well, Grice and Moffat are pretty close in practice and look like having a ding-dong battle today.
Indeed, and I think Brock will be in there too. He wasn't feeling very well yesterday. Feels very well today, but he's been stricken by a bit of a bug all this week and hasn't been 100%, but he's very happy with the way he feels at the moment. Did a 59.5 this morning on race tyres and full tanks. I think personally that Moffat is the man who can win the race in terms of how his car will be going, the lap times he can do by race end. But his problem is going to be finding his way around a pack of V8s which have got far more grunt out of corners, and which by race end will have almost no brakes. It's a very, very hard circuit on brakes. And how Moffat finds his way around them is going to be the problem. We saw at Sandown him have a similar problem, trying to find his way around Grice only a few laps from the end of the race, and ultimately, of course, it spelled his demise from the race, as we saw.
So as Alan Moffat broke his axle at Sandown, Grice went on to win it, and those two are on the front row of the grid here today.
Yes, it's going to be a great race, and of course we all talk of the Mazda having no grunt. It's a very light car, and he gets it off the line remarkably fast. Quite frankly, I can't understand how he does it, but he really does. He concentrates his mind so hard. He's done nearly 200 laps of sorting and of practice here at Symmons since last Wednesday, and he would put more effort into his car, more background work, sorting, development than probably any other 2 teams in the championships. He's a very, very serious man when it comes to winning motor races. Absolute perfectionist.
And one that we haven't mentioned, who's won the Australian Touring Car Championship the last 2 years, what about the chances of Dick Johnson?
Dick's doing a grand job in a car that's not quite competitive with the rest of the field at the moment. They've done a lot of work on the car since the last round at Sandown, and since, in fact, last weekend at Amaroo, where it was fairly disappointing and was blown off by Masterton in other Falcon, which until now has been slower than Dick's. But he's got George Shepherd working with him, and as I say, they've done a lot of work, a lot of changes. They're happier with the car, but I still can't see him challenging for the lead, although he could be a real nuisance if he gets a very good start early on.
Thanks, Will. Look forward to hearing you during the afternoon.
Calder was won by Alan Moffat. Sandown, the second round in Victoria, was won by Alan Grice, so that 25 points has gone to both Grice and Moffat for those victories. George Fury, on the other hand, has taken second place at Calder, fourth at Sandown, and has amassed 48 points thereby. Murray Carter has points from both rounds, a third and a fifth. Gary Rogers, not competing today, a fourth and an eighth. Steve Harrington, who is running today, has had 2 sixths. Then we come down to the people who've had 1 result only each. Warren Cullen's had 2, a fifth and a ninth. So that you can see the task, for instance, of Peter Brock, who at Sandown came second, is a very large one indeed to rein in this handy lead that George Fury has got. But there are 6 rounds remaining, including today's round. 8 rounds in all for the series, only 1 round to be dropped.
The top 6 cars yesterday were under the lap record of Peter Brock's at 60.68 seconds. The top 4 cars were under Brock's pole position setting time of last year at 59.7. On pole position stands Allan Grice on 58.93 in a V8 Holden Commodore. Beside him, Alan Moffat, 59.18. On the second row of the grid, Peter Brock, 59.31. Beside him, in the turbocharged 1770cc Nissan Bluebird, George Fury on 59.65. Then comes the defending Australian Touring Car champion, Dick Johnson, on 60.16 seconds. Only 1.23 seconds separates the top 5 major contenders in today's race. Commodore, Mazda, Commodore, Nissan and Ford.
30 seconds to go. The grid now cleared of officials and of pit crews. And between Moffat, who's won 3 touring car championships, Brock, who's won 3, and Johnson, who's won the past 2, we have 8 Australian touring car championships represented. This race is over 40 laps. That's 96 kilometres on the circuit that's hardest in Australia on brakes.
Flags up.
Grice jumps beautifully.
Brock looking for a way through on the inside, and Dick Johnson ranging up.
And Fury's got the run. Fury to the lead. Can he get round Grice and take the lead? And there's the answer. He has. And Parsons, the local Tasmanian, running too wide though, is beside Brock in 4th. Fury, Grice now wants the lead. A blow up in the foreground there, and we can't identify that.
That's Murray
Carter, who rebuilt an engine overnight, and it has gone only a few hundred metres, and Grice now leads from Fury. There's Carter. Out. 2 hours sleep last night, $15,000 worth of parts destroyed yesterday, and he's gone again. No wonder he wants to build a Mazda.
Peter Brock in the lead. George Fury challenging. No, Brock's not in the lead.
Brock's done well, though, to slip his way past Fury. The fear of Moffat and Fury was that Johnson might get a really good start and be very hard to get round later in the race, but there you can see he's a fair way back.
So Allan Grice from pole position takes the lead from Peter Brock. George Fury in 3rd position.
Johnson is 6th and Parsons is 7th, so Parsons at one stage ranging beside Brock for 4th, and slipped to 6th, where Brock has gone to 2nd, and that's the difference of experience. 65.98, their standing lap, so only about 5 seconds lost as Murray Carter comes into the pits in the acceleration up to racing speed from the start. Grice pulling away, touch from Brock, who's definitely pulling away by some margin from Fury, who has Parsons going through on him. Moffat is 5th, Johnson 6th, and Cullen is 7th. There you see Parsons on Fury. Fury, I'd say, not operating as well as he would have liked. Parsons had a brilliant run in this race last year. There's Moffat, Johnson, 5th, 6th, Cullen 7th, Harrington 8th, and 9th. There is Benson Brown.
The Symmons Plains circuit particularly hard on brakes. If the outright V8 cars start to force the pace too early in the event, they could find themselves losing brakes in the closing stages, and that's exactly what Allan Moffat back in 5th place is hoping.
Grice now, who only half an hour ago was saying back in the old days, and it's a few years since he's driven here actually, back in the old days in an L34 Tirana, he said in 3 laps we had no brakes. The pedal went to the floor, the retardation was 0, and he said at the race end, the cars would do a nose-to-tail cruise around the pits, cooling the brakes off so the rear drums wouldn't catch fire. No such problem, though, for this man in car number 43. He's in 5th place at the moment. Parsons locking up, as you could see, him getting a little bit cheeky in under George Fury, and what a grand job this young Tasmanian is doing.
Nonetheless, Allan Moffat will be quite keen to get through him and put any possibility of the danger of Parsons having a lose behind him, as Dick Johnson now gets right onto Allan Moffat's tail. And Johnson said before the race that what he really wanted to do today, figuring that a win was perhaps a little bit beyond him with a car which still needs development, was at least to get in front of Allan Moffat. We don't know of any animosity between them, but Johnson seemed quite adamant that Moffat was the man he wanted to beat here today.
60.12 Grice's last lap time. Full tanks, drivers settling in. He's going very quickly, well under the lap record by half a second. Fury third. You can see just now consolidating on Parsons, who's being hard-pressed there by Moffat. And he hasn't got much breathing space behind him. And the big blue Falcon of Dick Johnson. Moffat's through on Parsons. Fourth place. You cannot relax with Alan George Moffat behind you.
Moffat driving a left-hand drive car, the reason being that last year he was driving so hard in his right-hand drive car that it got up on two wheels right through that section there. He figures if he gets into the left-hand drive car today, and he has a choice of both, that his 80 kilograms of weight will help keep the wheels on the ground and help keep traction moving for him.
Grice has come down to a 59.96. Again, a lap record to the lead man, flying. And the cool, calculating brain in car 43. The man sitting there, knowing the job in hand, working away, calculating, patient, determined that the other small car in the race, George Fury, doesn't stay in front of him, and nor, for that matter, do any of the V8s he hopes. The gaps, first to second, 0.8 of a second, second to third, 3 seconds.
And Alan Grice now in the lead in car 6, the Roadways STP car, would be delighted being where he is at the moment. He says that Peter Brock is the best starter in Australian motor racing. He says that Brock's first 3 laps are absolutely magic and that no one else can keep with Brock. He says if he can keep with Brock for the first 3 laps, that's when Brock starts to show his Achilles heel. Instead of keeping with Brock, he's led him, and that's something that will make Alan Grice very happy indeed.
Cullen Harrington, who is Grice's teammate, and then Benson Brown at tail end of the field, at the front of the field. This is the man in the STP Roadways car. It's a dual sponsorship for that team. And the man who 18 months ago was sacked as a racing driver and who started a court action and was very much down, but he said not out. And look at the way he's come back. And he's so relaxed. He's not only doing things well on the track, but he's not uptight about it. He's loving it. He's enjoying his success. The team's a happy one. And he's leading a man who many regard as the best touring car driver in the country. Dick Johnson doesn't regard him as that. Alan Moffat would argue about it, but that's the man I'm talking of, and he certainly is a master. And if you're in front of him, you've got a very good car and you're doing things very well. Behind, look at there, Fury's car, and in behind it is Alan Moffat. You can barely see his car, he's in so close. And he's just about to take third, not this time. But Fury won't want to leave that much of a gap once more. Turbo versus Wankel. Look at the difference, there's nothing. Four cylinders supercharged, Wankel rotary spinning and churning away and making more noise than any other car on the track by a long shot, and he's got third. So it's Grice, Brock, Moffat, Fury, Parsons, Johnson, Cullen, Harrington, Benson Brown, and Laurie Nelson in the 3-litre Capri. And the gap is pulling already. Look at him. This is Parsons doing a grand job there. The plain exterior of that car tells you how much backing he's got, which is almost none. And on ability, smoothness, sensible driving, he's going very well indeed. That's the race situation through the fastest part of the circuit, and it's very quick indeed through there. Car's at maximum speed, getting a bit sideways, having to stay very settled.
Moffat 2.6 seconds behind Peter Brock.
They've covered 7 laps. They've been racing 8 minutes. Grice has been in the lead all but about 7.5 of those 8 minutes. And with a nice little buffer to Brock, and then Moffat. And watch what Moffat does as he relentlessly chases Peter Brock, the next man in his gun sights.
Peter Brock with a touch of pleurisy in the last couple of days. In fact, left most of the testing of his motor car on Friday to Larry Perkins, who's now joined the Holden dealer team.
The best part for Grice of being in the position he's in at the moment is not the lead per se, but it's the fact that he's able to drive it as he wants to drive it, particularly with regard to brakes. He's able to be gentle on them, so too at the moment is Peter Brock, but once you see Moffat get onto Brock, you're going to see Brock's brakes come under a lot of pressure, because that's the area where Moffat will be exploiting him and trying to get round him and trying to make him stretch his car.
Speculation in the pits that this could be one of the last times we see Grice in this particular car. The STP Roadways team has purchased the car which Grice raced last year for the Recar team, the car that Grice rates as being the best Holden Commodore in the country, and that car will join the team within the next couple of weeks.
2.6 seconds the gap Brock to Moffat.
So that gap holding for the last 2 laps.
As Grice is coming up to lap, believe it or not, Laurie Nelson, who is in 10th place, and that's after just 9 laps.
Nelson broke a half shaft in practice earlier today and had to drop the entire differential out of the car to replace it, so he would certainly be in a position where he's trying it out. At the same time, keep in mind that the Capri lap record here, in other words the under 3 litre lap record, stands at 66.5 seconds rather. George Fury, running in the under 3 litre class, is down to 59.65 seconds, 6.55 seconds under the old 3 litre record. So that's the potential of a car only last year to this.
That record held by Colin Bond in a 3 litre Capri, and Nelson in a similar car 1 second under it. There he is. He's running second in the 3 litre class to George Fury, almost a lap down to Fury in the Turbo Bluebird. Times now going out to 60.13, dropping a slow to a 3.6, and then beating up a touch to 60.07 for Allan Grice. So you can see there that his times have varied by 0.29 of a second over 6 laps.
Moffat, a little stymied by lap traffic, drops back to 3.2 seconds behind Peter Brock. As in just 11 laps, Allan Grice comes up to double lap Bob Holden in the slowest car in the event, the Ford Escort 2 litre.
And 11 laps completed in this 40-lap race, 29 still remaining for Allan Grice, then Peter Brock. Moffat still third, and I suspect losing ground. Yes, the stopwatch confirms losing ground to Peter Brock. 3.2 seconds, the gap between second and third place at the moment. As Grice then puts in a half second slower lap than his best of the last 6, dropping to a 60.57. But as you can see too, he's getting into traffic. And as he said, I've only done 8 consistent hard laps here, or continuous hard laps. He said, I don't know if the brakes will go at 10 laps or at 20 laps or 25 or whether they'll last. But he said, I don't really think they're going to last. John Harvey, Peter Brock's team manager, said, oh yes, they'll last, no trouble. He said, mightn't be as good as the Mazda or the Bluebird, but he said they'll be better than Dick Johnson's.
Grice particularly satisfied with his combination of tyres on this motor car. He's been experimenting with 3 compounds of tyres available to him and has remained incredibly secretive about just how he's used the combinations of tyres front and rear. As Dick Johnson slows... No, he doesn't. So Johnson's still chasing past us at the rear of the field. So come up to lap Bob Holden again, and Holden moves right off the track to let them through. Holden, one of the, probably the oldest competitor in the event, well deserves the title of a veteran. In fact, there are photographs in the pits of him here taken some 25 years ago at the now defunct Longford circuit, in which he was racing in the South Pacific Series against such people as Jackie Stewart, Jack Craven, Biff Stillwell.
3 seconds, Moffat forward to Brock in second place, and about 2.63 further forward to Allan Grice, the race leader. So, other than that Brock would like to be able to stay with Grice, I think everybody feeling happy. Moffat knowing that this is not the time of the race where he'll be able to make much on the V8s, because at this stage they're running fairly healthily. We've seen a place further back where Steve Harrington in car number 4 has taken Warren Cullen, pushing Cullen from 7th to 8th, Harrington coming forward to 7th.
But we're watching the difference in brakes as Moffat comes down into Coca-Cola corner. The V8s are throwing out their anchors at about the 200-metre mark. Moffat goes past the 200 and gets significantly down towards the 100-metre mark before his brake lights come on. So Moffat really making use of the light weight of his motor car, the brakes of his motor car, to be able to try and catch the V8s in the braking areas, in the areas where the V8s don't want to extend themselves.
Grice to Brock is 2.64 seconds. To Moffat, 3.6. Brock's going forward. In that trio of first, second and third place, it's Brock that's making the move. He's made a little bit of ground on Grice and he's pulled ground on Moffat. Fury 2, losing absolutely nothing to Moffat. Making ground, I suspect, on Moffat and putting the watch on him. The story is 2.4 seconds, the gap. There you see it. Moffat to Fury, third to fourth. Parsons still with Johnson looming close behind him, but the situation unchanged in 5th and 6th behind Moffat, Fury, and then, of course, in front of them, Grice, Brock.
And Brock may have brake troubles coming through the sweep at that time. He had an experimental dab at his brakes before he got anywhere near the braking area. So Brock may be with brake troubles.
15 laps covered. Grice now, from that lap we told you 5 ago of a 60.57 for Grice, he's now settling at 60.4, 60.45, 42.5. So he's dropped 0.3 of a second. Fury is still more than 3 seconds behind Moffat.
Fury's car, a turbocharged one at 1770 cc's, multiplied by a factor of 1.4 to even out the turbocharger against the naturally aspirated cars. That's a factor applied by the ruling body of motorsport in Australia, and rather a controversial one when it comes to this car. It leads the Australian Touring Car Championship at the moment. There are many people who say it's unfair that the car should be racing in the under 3 litre division. To get it into the over 3 litre division would require a revision of the regulations, and the multiplication factor would have to come up to 1.65, 1.7 to in fact make it an over 3 litre motor car. The precedent exists in England. However, also in England, free use of turbochargers is allowed, which would make the car even faster again, and that's what Howard Marsden, the team manager, is holding out for. There's the race leader.
Grice to Brock is 3 seconds, to Moffat's 2.6, and back to Fury it's 3. So still about that 8.6 blanketing the first 3. Fury, not with an enormous amount of incentive to try and chase Moffat and mix it with him. As a driver, he'd love to. His team manager, Howard Marsden, is probably telling him the opposite, saying, keep it cool, don't overdrive, don't stretch it mechanically, you're in the lead in the championship. The only one of the 5 quick runners in the championship who've finished 2 races. We want to finish all 7 or 8. And if we go on doing that, we'll get there in the sort of position you're at the moment. Particularly as Allan Moffat, who looks to be favoured on many of the circuits, is only 1 place in front of him at this stage. Fascinating championship this year for the range of vehicles. competitive Commodores, almost competitive Falcons, the competitive Bluebird, and the competitive Mazda RX-7. 4 cars and 5 drivers, almost any of whom could win various of the rounds. And then throw in plenty of support Commodores and some Falcons. We'll see, for instance, at some of the other rounds, Steve Masterton. Much bigger fields than this, but the costs of getting to Tasmania tend to inhibit all but the heavily financed teams. It cost the Marlborough Holden dealer team to get their transporter across $1,200 on the boat, there and back, and the prize money for the race is $1,200. So you can imagine how much they're making out of this weekend, running as they are in second place with accommodation, airfares, tyres, wear and tear to be thrown in on top of that.
Moffat starts to move up on Peter Brock. The gap is 2.2 seconds. And certainly closing. There they are, Moffat and Brock on the track together. Watch Moffat in the braking area. He'll go in deeper than Brock. Look at that, look how close he's getting.
That's the thing that lifts the driver's morale, and boy, it sags the morale of the one in front when he looks in the rear vision mirror and he suddenly sees a very much bigger sign writing in the rear vision mirror. 1 second, 1.06 seconds from second Peter Brock to third Allan Moffat. Oh, it's less than that now. Nothing.
And Brock again going for those security dabs on the brakes before he gets anywhere near the braking area. So that's his Achilles heel.
Well, what a rerun of Sandown. Brock being lined up by Moffat as he was at Sandown. When he found his way through there, we then saw Grice lined up, but as we saw recently, Moffat didn't quite succeed in his attempt to get round him. Only a couple of laps from the end. We are now at half race distance. 20 laps are completed.
Moffat on the outside.
Thank you, he says. Brock on the inside now to accelerate him. No, he doesn't want to argue. Or can't argue. Yes, he does, if he can get down inside here, but he won't outbrake him up to the next, so...
Brave stuff round the outside of the sweeper.
And he will, thank you.
Right out in the marbles.
And Moffat outbrakes him and says, you've got to do better than that, and look at the distance under brakes. Dear oh me. That was telling. And
Laurie Nelson goes to wave Peter Brock through, and Brock takes all the time in the world to take it.
Peter Brock, the driver, has an answer to that, but Peter Brock's car has got no answer. And Allan Moffat strides forward as Alan Grice drops his times from 60.5 to a 0.6, a 0.7, back to a 4.8, then an 8.2, then a 6.4, and then 61. The story is all really in the brakes because they're getting lighter fuel loads, but getting slower.
Grice still confident on his brakes, no security dabs at all as he goes down into Coca-Cola corner.
And he's 4 3/4 seconds in front of Moffat.
And you don't get an enviable reputation of one of Australia's best.
That's Grice flinging it out of the S's and onto the pit straight.
4.21, half a second in half a lap. Moffat pursuing Grice. Grice's teammate Steve Harrington still in 7th place, still in front of Warren Cullen in 8th in car 22. Back to about a 4.6. So depending on where you time them on the circuit, the gap is lessening and increasing. Grice to this man Moffat. 3rd, Brock. 4th, Fury. 5th is Parsons, whose efforts can't be praised enough in the white car number 50, Commodore. There's 1st, 2nd, 3rd. with 18 to go. They've completed 23.
Up to lap, Clive Benson Brown, the local owner of the Launceston Hotel.
4 seconds now. Behind the leader, car number 6, is Allan Moffat in that bright blue and white Mazda.
Grice making his car work a lot less than the other V8s in the race as well. He's blessed with a lot of torque in this V8 engine that he has, so going down into Coca-Cola corner, he uses third gear, while the other V8s are using second.
The worst part, well, the second worst part about running out of brakes is that you then end up working the other parts of the car harder. Engine, gearboxes, and to a lesser extent, differentials. And as he said, in the L34 that had lousy brakes, it had a weak gearbox. And he laughed almost hysterically. Because it really was, he said, they talk about those being the good old days. He said, dear me. But that man, Alan Grice, leads now by only 3.4 seconds. Can he hang on to the lead as he did at Sandown to the challenges of Allan Moffat in car 43? And frankly, with 16 to go, 24 completed, I doubt it. But it's going to be marvellous to watch.
That's Dick Johnson in car 17. In 6th position, following David Parsons, Dick Johnson, searching for all sorts of answers out of the Ford V8 development program, and one of them he's come up with is to turbocharge the 4.1 litre Ford 6-cylinder engine. He's thinking very seriously about it for 2 reasons. One, because he believes he can get more horsepower than he's getting out of the V8, up to 100 horsepower more, but 2, because he could save some 200 kilograms of weight by using the lighter 6-cylinder engine. He says that this car has far too much weight on the front end. It's caused him all sorts of suspension difficulties, and he can't get it to handle correctly. So much so that he's even taken to putting lead weights in the rear of the car to try and make the rear of the car heavier, while most other people are trying to get weight out of their vehicles. Now, Johnson is looking at a development program which will make the front of his car lighter and give him more horsepower, but it's a long way off. Certainly not 1983. So this is the car that he'll race in the entire Australian Touring Car Championship, and also in the Endurance Championships and the James Hardy 1000 later this year.
That includes, of course, the coming Geelong 500-kilometre street race, as the gap, Grice to Moffat, diminishes ridiculously.
There it is. That's Grice. And that's Moffat.
And it's just over 2 seconds, about 2.1, and with only 2.1 seconds and a car width opening needed, Allan Moffat has 13 laps to solve the problem. Grice has 13 laps to argue and to do his best and to send the other man the long way round, and he loves a scrap.
Grice has been thinking a lot about this race. He's been thinking that it's not a 40-lap sprint, that he's got to conserve his motor car for any challenges that might be thrown out in the last stages. Allan Moffat has always worked on the theory that the big cars will break after a time and that the little car, fresh, will be able to challenge in the closing stages. They've both got basically the same tactics. Now we're really going to see a motor race.
Grice's lap times have dropped from a best of 59.96 to as slow as to 61.72, a 1.8 seconds nearly difference. And that's all at the 2 braking points around that section there and at the end of the main straight. Not to mention coming down here, float over the crest, square the car, now hard on them, go left into a very tight corner, and you can see here, there how this little hair, how close he now is, and on the stopwatch It's well under 2, and in fact Grice has picked it up from a 61.17 the previous lap, 0.8 quicker, 60.37 seconds this time. And the reason all in the rear vision mirror, got nothing to do with pit signals, because he doesn't need pit signals anymore to tell him what's going on. 1.35 is the gap on the watch.
Moffat's major problem is a gearing one. When he comes down now into Coca-Cola Corner, he'll go back into second gear, but it's a very low gear. He needs to get up into third very quickly, so he changes up almost in the corner. In other words, unsettling the motor car. He's working terribly hard in the cockpit, keeping the car straight. He only needs to make a miscalculation to miss a gear, and he can blow the whole thing sky high. So if Allan Moffat is to really pull the lap times down, he's got to be so precise. So much depends on the driver and driver control. The lights will start flashing as this traffic jam in front of them places yet another constraint on what might happen in the event.
Another 1/10 of a second cut away by Allan Grice, 60.27, and in fact pulled the lead out by a couple of tenths on Moffat. And in traffic, his actually, although he has trouble pulling up, but is the better car, because if he gets balked, he can pick it up again more quickly. Moffat's got to keep that engine spinning in its very narrow power band. He dare not lift, he dare not back off.
Warren Callan doesn't make it easy for Allan Grice, but he gets through.
Grice coming up to lap his teammate Harrington, who is in 7th place. Car number 4. Young Steve Harrington, son of Ian Harrington, who owns Roadways, one of the 2 major partners in the team for which Grice drives.
Moffat now comes up on Cullen. He'll want to way through quickly.
That's Bob Holden, followed by Laurie Nelson, Escort and Capri
going for it on the inside.
And then suddenly Grice has dropped a second, 61.2, and obviously his right foot on the brake pedal told him that 60.2 was too quick and too hard on the brakes, and it was demanding something that they couldn't give or go on giving.
Grice comes up to Harrington.
1.54 still, 10 to go, 30 completed. 3/4 race distance. Allan Grice putting up a game performance. He's plumbing deep into his bag of experience and skill and determination.
Moffat now up to lap the other Roadways car, and will Harrington make it easy?
And Grice won't thank him if he does. But he won't have much option about it, really.
Moffat drives right back from the Roadways car. He was closer.
Grice has come back to a 60.12. We've still got Brock in 3rd, still got Fury 4th, Parsons 5th, Johnson 6th. Lapped is Harrington 7th, Cullen 8th, Benson Brown 9th, Nelson 10th, Bob Holden 11th.
An indication from Harrington.
Murray Carter, the only retirement, which is surprising in today's heat.
And there it goes. Harrington keeps nicely out of the way. Good sportsmanship, and lets Allan Moffat through.
Well, bigger, more experienced men than Steve Harrington, people like Bob Jane and Ian Hagon have been intimidated by Allan Moffat in the past by his determination and his intensity to get through. Grice staying in the 60s, 60.3, and there's 8 to go. Can this man do it? Can that man stay in front? They're both producing all that they've got, and Fury is gaining on Brock.
And there's Brock and Fury side by side as they go down the back straight. That's it, there goes George. Up into 3rd position, vanquishing Peter Brock. And that was big stuff, side by side through the Castrol sweeper. George Fury on the inside, forcing Peter Brock out wide, and he gave Brock no choice in the braking area. And Peter Brock will not be a happy man at Symmons Plains today.
In the present placings, with 33 completed, 40 the race distance, 7 to go, Grice would get 25 points for first, Moffat would get 23 for second, Fury, because he gets a different point score, third place outright achieved by an under 3 litre car, gives him 24 points, and Brock in fourth place gets only 17. So Fury, with 24 to his 48, would go to 72 in the championship. With Grice on 25, getting 25 would go to 50. He'd be 22 behind Fury. Moffat on 25 also would go to 48.
2.8 seconds separates first to second position. Almost 16 seconds back to this man, George Fury, in third.
And Grice still in the 60.7s.
That's Grice. That's Moffat right behind him.
Peter Brock's out. He's pulled up at the start-finish line under the bridge, and it's a no points for 2 rounds out of 3 for the 3 times champion, 1974, 78 and 80, out of the Symmons Plains round 3 of the Australian Touring Car Championship. So he remains on a dismal and very far distant 23 points, a long, long way from the series leaders.
Moffat commences the challenge again. 1.8 seconds the difference, and you can see it now closing. You can see them visibly on the track. Difficult to see them any other way. There's Peter Brock out of his car.
0.73 of a second, the gap, first to second. Oh, dear, oh me. It is really a rerun of Sandown, isn't it? And I suppose Moffat doesn't really want to put on maximum pressure until close to the end, because he'd hate to see Grice come back. He'd hate to give Grice time to think about it. He'd rather come at him hard once and try and knock him over and bolt for a lap or two after he gets past him, if he can. He'd like to ruin his brakes in the process from the pressure, and that's what he's doing now, because they're on their 36th lap.
Lap traffic could do it. Laurie Nelson in the way. He's a good driver. He'll get out of it quickly. In front of that, Bob Holden. There goes Grice. Moffat right on his tail, going through.
And it's only 3 laps to the end of this third round of the Australian Touring Car Championship, with the 4th to be run at Wanneroo. Sorry, 4 laps, they've completed.
Oh, look at Moffat!
And he won't get through. Grice goes back. A drag race, and Grice, well, he'll do the same as he did to Brock.
Oh, Grice has gone. That's a brave move from Grice. He's gone for the inside, really relying on the power of this car. Now the braking manoeuvre. There's Brock's car smoking. That's the front brakes. As we go down into the braking area, it's Grice in the lead, holding out Moffat. Moffat for the outside, just like Sandown, and he's got it!
Oh, you've got to give the man big marks, because that didn't come from just what he was determined to do in this race and what he can do, but it came from days and days and hundreds of laps of testing, and he has 3 laps to go.
And I don't reckon that Grice has got an answer to that. Brock's car, you can see the smoke coming from the front end of it. Well, that's the brakes.
It's appropriately sponsored for what it's doing at the moment. As the new race leader achieved on lap 37 with 3 to go, Allan Moffat strides into the lead, and frankly, I did think he'd do it.
Watch the power of Grice now down the straight. This is where it could happen. Moffat's got to block every way down here. It's Grice.
But Moffat will go round him.
No, he won't. No, he won't.
And Grice is going to argue, and he'll go panel pushing if he has to.
And Moffat's off into the dirt.
Well,
the answer there wasn't so much in car condition, but in fantastic driver determination.
Well, that's proved us wrong. 2 laps to go. 2 hard, fast, furious laps.
There's a replay
very
of it as
determined
they go
men.
into the race. This is a replay. As Moffat looks for the outside and just can't do it. He's just forced off. There is not enough room in that corner for both of them. And now you see the gap that's open between Allan Moffat in second position and Allan Grice.
And they'll argue and they'll complain and everybody in the pits will have an opinion. But what I say is that the man in the lead at the moment was prepared to go racing and he was trying hard, and if it gets to a squeeze and a push, well, that's what entertains the crowd, and good on you, Allan Grice. And I'm not saying that because I want to see Allan Moffat beaten. I'm saying it because I want to see hard racing and entertaining racing, and he's giving it to us. And Allan Moffat's going to come back at him, nothing is more certain. He's got 1.5 laps. And Grice is looking at 25 points, as I said before.
If he is going to come back at him, it's not going to happen for a little while yet, because we've got a situation where tyres have been pushed to the limit, where they're going off, where brakes have been pushed to the limit, and Moffat's got to get both those components to recover before he can try it again.
So that will make the championship situation 72 to Fury, who's still running in third place, 50 to Grice, and there's the man, and 48 to Moffat in third place, who's had a win so far, and a non-finish at Sandown, and second place at the moment here today. And this man, against my judgment, is the man leading the race with no chance for the tremendous flying, heroic Allan Moffat to do anything on the run to the finishing line, to the checkered flag, which goes to Allan Grice from Allan Moffat in a brilliant race and a brilliant finish to the third round of the Australian Touring Car Championship at Symmons Plains near Launceston, and in a race time of 40 minutes 28.77 seconds. Third place is about to be taken by the Nissan team entry of George Fury, former Australian rally champion in the Nissan Bluebird Turbo, who finishes now in front of young Tasmanian David Parsons, Queenslander Dick Johnson, and Grice's teammate Steve Harrington, sixth.
Well, what fantastic racing from Allan Grice and Allan Moffat. As Clive Benson-Brown goes through, but there's the winner, Allan Grice, and a worthy winner indeed of the third round of the championship. The driving between Grice and Moffat was clean, sportsmanlike, and incredibly determined.
That'll depend on whether you ask Allan Moffat later, because he won't have liked that manoeuvre, and it's fairly certain that they banged or touched panels, but there was a gap. Grice got in there, and as best we could see, and we have to say that with all the benefits of the cameras, from our angle, we couldn't see if Grice was squeezing him outward on the circuit there. But as I say, it's the sort of determination, the racing, the tiger, that we want to see from racing drivers, and it's good stuff. That man, well, as I said before, nobody puts in more effort into his racing than Allan Moffat. Nobody is more intense, more dedicated than he. Not, I suspect, the natural talent of Peter Brock, for instance, but tremendously determined. And not only has the team's STP Roadways team cars graced the Touring Car Championship, starting only 3 rounds ago, with the next to be held at Wanneroo in Western Australia, but so too have their promotional girls, who are very welcome and who are doing a grand job in helping the team, and who have brought, along with various other teams, a very professional approach in the pit area to the motor racing. And that's the man of the moment, Allan Grice from Newcastle, former pastry cook, 18 months ago, sacked racing driver, man prepared to sell everything, to spend on court costs, arguing over his sacking and his contract. This the man who didn't quite pull it off. We can't see the other side of the car, the side that was closest to Grice. But he does a grand job.
Mick Webb, team mechanic, getting words from the boss. Sometimes those words can be particularly vitriolic, and there's Drew Morphett with Allan Grice.
Well, I'd been out there for 38 laps or 39 laps, and would have been a little delinquent of me not to have one last go, wouldn't it?
Did you think it was too late once he got past you, because he was picking up so much under braking?
Yes, I did. But when he did go past and I saw the back of his car, I thought I had tyre trouble. He obviously ran a soft compound, and when I look at the replay tonight, I'm sure that it'll bear me out. He's got smoke coming out of the back of his rear right wheel. So he had actually overheated a softer compound, and that, I guess, gave me a little bit more to aim for, and then I set out again. But I was trying to keep the last couple of very hard brake applications towards the end, so I think I did the right thing there.
Yeah, you nursed it in the middle stages.
Yes, I did nurse it and brought my braking distances back so that I could go hard at the end, but even so, she doesn't have any brakes left at the moment. But it's beautiful to win. I'm almost at Tasmania now, you know, and in the home state of roadways. It's beautiful to get a win for Ian Harrington, who's been a sponsor in sport for so many people for a long time, you know, a great guy for motor racing.
And Allan, I don't think that since the days of Brock's domination of the Sandown long-distance races, I've seen a man so confident before the race. You got your pole position in the first practice session yesterday, coasted for the rest of yesterday, and were a smiling man all day today.
Well, for these types of circuits, we've got the right car, we've got the right crew, we've got the right dollars behind us. And all you need then is somebody just to do an average sort of a driving job, and it all goes together.
Do you think that was an average sort of a drive?
I'll have a look at it tonight. I might have to change my mind.
I think there's a very big crowd here at Symmons Plains who reckons it's the best drive they ever saw. You should have seen the crowd on the hill go up when you went back past him.
Fine.
You look so much more of a relaxed person these days after the problems you had with your last team.
Certainly.
And even in previous races, you might have had the lead, but you might have gone too hard and spun it out. You're not doing that this time.
No, it's right. It's a totally different ball game where I'm a driver doing what I should be doing, and you know, there's just no hassles. If I put one into the fence these days, the boys just go and fix it up, and we all have a drink after. There's no hassles about anything like that. You know, it's a no-hassle team, and it's so easy to do your job. I guess if McEnroe was continually arguing with his wife or his girlfriend, he'd finish up turning on some of the displays that he does at times.
Well, the new Allan Grice in the new team augurs well for touring car racing in Australia, and you're pretty well placed now.
Yes, I'm not aware of the points. There's still some controversy about the point scoring system, but we're happy to win races where we can, when we can, and see what the points add up to at the end of the year.
Well, ABC Sport will be there for the rest of the year, and look forward to seeing you again. Well done, Allan Grice.
Fine, thanks, Stuart.
Cheers.
So the point score is, as we told you, Fury leads on 72, from Grice second on 50, Moffat third on 48, fourth is Steve Harrington 39, and then a pile of people equal on fifth with 35, Murray Carter, Warren Cullen, Laurie Nelson and Dick Johnson. Our next ABC Motorsport telecast is next weekend, the Adelaide 3-hour motorcycle race from Adelaide International Raceway, but we'll be with you for the fourth round of the Australian Touring Car Championship from Wanneroo Park in Western Australia on the 24th of April, and before that, the Geelong 500-kilometre race from Victoria. Thank you for joining us. We'll be with you next week.
One.